Fox. I'm the director of the program for international legal studies at the law school, and I am very happy to welcome Mark Sadoff, who came all the way from Paris just to speak with us. But we're very grateful that he has made time to come and talk to you about his career practicing law outside the United States and in Europe and France specifically. It's not an opportunity that I think a lot of you or even I have that often, and so this is an invaluable opportunity to find out how somebody like Mark got to where he is. Speaking of doing things abroad, since you all are here, I want to take an opportunity to tell you about an event we're going to have on November 17th, which will be an information session about summer opportunities abroad, sponsored by the international program. And we'll be here during the lunch hour, and 4 students who were abroad last year in various internships that we sponsor will come and talk about their experiences, and I will talk about the application process. Don't worry, this isn't going to interfere with your studying for exams. Applications won't be due until January when you come back, but we wanted to give you an opportunity to find out about these before you go off over the holidays and think about whether you'd like to apply for these opportunities. So without further ado, let me introduce Mark Sadoff, Wayne Law School, class of 1986.
Thank you. First of all, my ideal setting would have been a small room sitting on the edge of the desk. I'm not used to this type of a setting, but I'll try not to be too nervous. If I'm nervous, I sniffle, but that's supposedly there are other people around who do that don't equate me with. If there are any questions, stop me anywhere along the line. This is informal, despite the barrier between us and the formality of the thing. The idea is to be informal, to just kind of take the time to share a little bit of what I did, because when I was in your position, first of all, this room didn't exist. Basically, as I was telling Greg earlier, anything I had to do, I had to create myself. And I think I've done okay. And happy with the life I've led, the career I've led up till now, and so I may as well share it with other people. I graduated from Wayne in 1986. I had desires to have an international career for social reasons. My wife had grown up overseas. She wanted to go back to Europe. I looked for internships. This was before the web. I looked for internships. I looked for lots of things. I spoke a little bit of French. I took classes in French. I tried to in the International Law Students Society, or whatever, I forget what it was called. It was run by one of his predecessors. Managed to get an article published in the International Lawyer, the American Bar Association International Lawyer. My goal was to have an international career. And yet I felt I was stuck in Detroit. Never to leave, never to move on. I had the great opportunity at that time to take a class from a great professor, nothing against Wayne State, but I took a class at the University of Michigan Law School with a guy who was, at the time, the American guru of GATT, which was the predecessor of the World Trade Organization. And his name was John Jackson. I believe finished his career at Georgetown, and he may be dead now, but because he was already pretty old. But a great guy, fascinating. It was just after the Tokyo round of negotiations, so anti-dumping law was in. It was after the Reagan administration came in, so antitrust law was out. And Washington, D.C. had this glut of antitrust lawyers who had nothing to do, and so they all went into anti-dumping law and flooded the Commerce Department with anti-dumping petitions and with defense of anti-dumping petitions. I was lucky enough to get a job at the Commerce Department doing anti-dumping. 30 lawyers. I started my career in Detroit. I started my career in a good commercial law firm in Detroit. Learn the rules, learn the rigor, sitting in the office, sitting in the library, researching, doing everything you're supposed to do. I don't know what the research is like today, because I don't do that work right now. But at the time, sitting in the library, following the keynotes, shepherdizing cases. I may be speaking a foreign language to you. I have no idea. It's been, I'll get back to it. I'm not, in a lot of ways, I took a lot of time not practicing law per se, as you might do it in a law firm at least. Practicing law every day, doing a lot of law every day. But all I wanted to do was to get out and do something. So I worked for this department, the Commerce Department, which was, I'll go through my career quickly, because that's not the interesting bit. The interesting bit is what you learn along the way, and how you can move forward and do what you want to do. So the Commerce Department was like 30 lawyers, average age 30, I was 26, 27. Crazy. We played together, we played softball together, we drank together, we did, and we worked really hard. With no means. I went from a law firm in Detroit where I hated the work I was doing, had all the means I wanted to doing something where I had no means, no salary, 50% cut in salary to work in Washington. Had a great time. But I wanted something more. I really wanted to do. And I used to walk home from work at the Commerce Department, walk by the Washington Public Library and start taking notes. Going through Martindale Hubble, taking notes on law firms, going through all the things. Again, I repeat, there was no web at this time. I amassed a list of like 300 names that I wrote to. And I wrote letters to 300 people that all went out at about the same time, the end of 1988. The idea that I would look for a job during 1989, figure out how you look for a job in Europe, and then do it again in 1990, and pinpoint and figure out how to get a job. Things happened, and strangely enough, I got a job almost right away. So I moved to Europe in the end of 1989. I moved to France. I moved to a small town in France worked for a large corporation who had an American on their staff for 10 years, who wanted to move back to the U.S. They were doing a joint venture in the U.S. and they were I hardly ever worked with the U.S. again over the next 25 years. I was hired to do an acquisition in the U.S., to work with a French-Japanese joint venture to do an acquisition in the U.S. That was my brief. That was why I was hired. I don't think, I must have looked at 3 elements of American law because our target company went bankrupt and filed for Chapter 11 within about 2 days of my arrival in France, and that was it. And they filed because of asbestos issues, and my boss said, asbestos, no way, asbestos, U.S., no. That was over. But I made a career for myself after that, working in Africa, less in Asia. Anyway, I stayed in-house there I stayed in-house in a number of different contexts for about 25 years, including 15 years as divisional general counsel for a major French corporation. First, 2 billion euro, 3 billion euro a year business, operating in about 60 countries, and then a much more European business, but a much bigger business, 16, 17 billion euro a year business, but in a more limited number of countries. Since the last 2 years, I've been in private practice. Back to private practice, although I swore when I left the the Detroit suburbs at 1 o'clock in the morning one day, after photocopying a piece of paper that said, "This page intentionally left blank." I said, why did I go through 7 years of college? Why did I go through 7 years of higher education to sit there at 1 o'clock in the morning photocopying something that says it's blank? And now I find myself again in private practice, having fun, working in the U.S. for the first time in a long time, trying to develop work with the U.S. Back in Michigan, although I swore I would never come back. Reviewed. And I have family in Michigan. I grew up here. I grew up in East Lansing. My family's still in East Lansing. And so, anyway, I went through that faster than I thought I would. So what is an international career? It takes lots of different forms. What I did in Washington was international. I mean, you can say international at its base level deals with another country. You have to view things in a couple different ways. And I think that if you're thinking about it, if you're here, you're not interested in the box lunch. It's good to have lunch, but it's really not that great. You're not here for the lunch, is what I'm saying. You're here because you're interested in something, perhaps, or at least thinking about an international career. So the first question you have to ask is, what is international? What do I really want to do? International takes a number of forms. There's what turns a lot of kids on in law school is public international law. Libya against Chad over on a border dispute. The role of the International Criminal Court, or the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. The possibilities of stopping a ship on the high seas. All these things, on its base level, you could even maybe extend to the hygiene bankruptcy and the right to stop the boats, the hygiene. Can you seize the boat going in or not? All these are issues that could be questions of public international law. To be perfectly honest, in the U.S., you have a couple of law firms that do a little bit of public international law, mainly on a pro bono basis, or not on a pro bono basis, but fairly rare. And you have one department at the Department of Justice, the Office of Legal OLS. Office of Legal Advisor. And there's also a department, there actually is there's an Office at Justice as well. That's the equivalent. The Office of Justice is interesting because they do, to the extent that there's any continuing hunt for ex-Nazis, it's done at Justice. To the extent that there's any work done on recovering stolen artwork during World War II, or the more or less recent case against the French railways for deportation during World War II. That's done at Justice. Those, if you can look into them, great. Do it. If that's what interests you, definitely do it, because those are very rare positions. When you get into onto a business front, you can divide the world more or less into inbound and outbound. For the government, you have the Commerce Department, International Trade Commission, who do a bit of international, they both do international trade, but it's inbound. It's U.S. law, it's the application in U.S. law of foreign treaty obligations, predominantly. Commerce Department, when I worked there doing anti-dumping duties, the Commerce Department determines, is there dumping? It's a question of U.S. law. I forget the statutes, 15 U.S.C. 1792? No, doesn't matter. But what it is a series of international obligations that have been transposed into U.S. law. But the application of the Commerce Department is solely a question of U.S. law. To the extent that things go wrong, the the challenges can be on the basis of international law, international treaty obligations, and whatever. But the first level of contest, of approach, be it before the Commerce Department or be it before the Court of International Trade, is a question solely of U.S. law. Okay, is that international or is that not international? I have a case on battery acid from Israel. Yeah, that is a question of U.S. law. Is it international? There are external, you have the export aspects. The export aspects on embargo control, on export controls to these things. When you sell a product, you sell a car overseas, if the car is green, khaki green, you might have a problem with dual use. Is it controlled under the U.S. export controls? The U.S. controls their exports in order to fulfill a certain economic and foreign policy, certain economic and foreign policy goals. You agree with those goals, you don't agree with those goals, doesn't matter. If you're working for the export administration, the Commerce Department, no one cares whether you agree with it, you're just supposed to do the work. But these are issues that you need to, again, these are areas where there are often jobs. At the time, the Commerce Department, I can't say now, Commerce Department used to be divided into three, multiple. You had NOAA, which is the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, and they do some international work. You have the trade part, import administration, export administration, which is divided, and trade policy, which is divided into three. That's Commerce, United States Trade Representative's Office, and then the ITC, which is a separate commission which falls under the agencies under the Constitution, that is, the things that are neither executive branch nor legislative, they're mixed. And they, in terms of, for instance, on dumping law or on any import work, on dumping they determine whether there's harm to the U.S. industry, or they also do what we call Article 337, Section 337, where on intellectual property grounds, people can bring a case and say, this violates my intellectual property, and you can block the import products. Customs is another issue. Again, it is national. It's national law. It's the application of national law. The application of international treaty obligations applied in national law. But it is an international career, and they're perfectly valid. Now, what have I done? Corporate law. You have in Detroit, you have all over the U.S. companies that have international operations. Often they use local counsel. Often, I hope they use local counsel when they're working in France, especially somebody who speaks English, that would be very good. But there are in-house positions all over the place in international companies. U.S. companies are my experience with U.S. companies, of course, I've worked with predominantly U.S. subsidiaries of foreign companies. They're a little bit provincial. They're not very open to international operations. They may have an international department in their law department. And they will be good. They'll be good lawyers. But not necessarily business-oriented, as business-oriented as some. Kind of hit the end of my train, but I think that the key, as in any career, is that you need to figure out what you want, where do you want to go, and fix the direction of where you want to go. is easy, then it becomes easy. It's work. And one way or another, it's important. Along the line, I've learned different things. Work in a law firm, if you work in a good standard law firm, I think that Professor Fox will be able to say, the one thing that you really learn more than anything is rigor. How you approach a problem. You think, I remember when I was in first year law school, we thought, oh, you know, the old scare you to death, work you to death, bore you to death. When we were scared to death, we figured we understood the problem. We understood the game. So we went back and we tried to play the game in a cool way and figure out that, oh, they don't really want you to do issue, rule, apply to the facts for a conclusion. They want you to really understand the law, and then we all got bad grades. Once we figured out the real game, then it became much easier to go through law school and to apply. That became the rigor that we learned, that we applied when we went into practice, that we try not to forget every time we think that we understand what we're doing. So, constant questioning of why am I doing it this way? How can I do it better? What can I do today that I can do tomorrow? That's important. Excuse me. I just had an idea and I lost it. I was digressing. Questions, first of all, to let me recover a little bit? Yes?
Did you ever have an issue in France with like language barriers at all?
At the beginning, yes, and I think that, thank you, I think that if you do want to go overseas, I think it's very important. Language is important. I had the advantage or the disadvantage. At the beginning, it was a disadvantage. To go into the world, I went to a small town in eastern France. I had French, but I wasn't fluent. The desire, and this is true generally. I mean, yeah, okay, I forgot this aspect. This is important. My desire was to learn French. When I first went, I was going to stay for 2 years. They wanted me to stay for 3. I stayed for. I'll do it the fun way. I wanted to stay for 2 years. They wanted me for 3. I stayed for 5. It was closer to 6, but. And they wanted me to stay for 3 years because they said culturally you're not going to be there for 3 years. And indeed, the language, the difference in culture, the move from a law firm, the relatively quick move from a law firm to a government practice to a corporation, first of all, it was stimulating, constantly gave you new things to learn, but it took time. It took time to assimilate, and it took time to feel comfortable and to have worked through. I personally feel that you can't understand the culture if you don't understand the language. Yeah, I'm thinking at the same time I say that, I think of different ideas that, you know, things that disprove that, but in reality I can think of nothing that disproves it. And I had a phase in my career when I was the head of the divisional general counsel for this group at a certain moment. I was traveling 3 days a week. And I must, like I say, 60 countries at least. And I was doing deals in Asia, South America, Africa, different places. And I would go I would visit a place for 6 months and then I'd never see it again. And I'd do my normal work, which was mainly around Europe and not exclusively. And yeah, you develop a certain number of habits. I like to say, my goal originally when I started traveling to meet the people within my department, not my department, because I wasn't alone, but I had 2 people. I worked with 2 or 3 French lawyers at headquarters, and the rest was just a little bit of outside counsel, but mainly just lots of counsel. Let me come back to that in a second. But my goal was to connect with these people through a series of those things. It turned out I was fine, I was okay, and then I hit Finland. I was fine through Denmark, Sweden, Netherlands. I mean, I don't speak German, but all these Germanic-based languages have a certain amount of, the Slavic languages have similarities, the Germanic languages have a similarity. And if you just make a little bit of effort, I had a funny case where I was doing a deal in Warsaw back in the late 90s, and our offices were not very far from the airport, and so we had a tendency to leave the meetings at the last second to get the plane back to Paris. And I remember I jumped into a cab that was parked on the street, and I was in a rush, and I was a little bit rude, but I said to the guy, must have said, "Quick, let's go to the airport." And he understood nothing. I didn't know the word in Polish. And I was old, and I finally said, "Schnell," and he moved. But that was a different story. But yes, language is very important. And I think another thing that's important, and I can't stress this enough, I'll go back to what you're going to do next year or the year after. You have to be well-based. Let me say this a different way. You have a great advantage from what I've seen in the world. And it's not because I've seen it, and I think American legal education puts you at a great advantage over a lot of other people. License. You're probably, sometimes you sit in your study groups, or you sit with your friends or family, and you say, I don't know what I'm learning. I'm not really learning anything. Or you don't feel like you've got, like you have this thing. But what you have been exposed to, as opposed to a lot of other people certainly from civil law traditions, civil law training, is if you know the basic concepts of law, the concept that you don't know, you have links to how to understand. The whole concept of this bizarre form of education that we've put up with and that we've perpetuated through the years, for better or for worse. I won't be too, not, but it's true. The Socratic method is weird. Let's just put it that way. But what it does train you for, and I don't know how it's taught these days, if it's still done that way, but I'm sure it is, because everybody that you have as a professor learn that way. And it's impossible for somebody to get off the rails and to say, this is all garbage, let's start again. Because everyone's got time. So, but what it does teach you is what you haven't seen next. Because there's this constant barrage. You go to any class, I can tell you the worst class I ever had in this law school was evidence. My guess is that the teacher is long dead. I hope he's long dead, and I hope he's suffering desperately. But the one thing he constantly did, other than Board of Health, was to constantly barrage us with something we hadn't seen. So if this changes, what does this do? If this changes, what does that do? And what you learn in a business, at least in an international business situation, you are constantly up against things that you don't know. I'm sitting in the military, I'm sitting doing an acquisition in Turkey. I don't know anything about Turkish law. I have Turkish counsel with me when I think I need to ask a question. But I don't need to ask a question because everything seems to make sense. Every now and then something doesn't make sense. You need to be able to say, well, that doesn't make sense, but then you integrate it. You say, well, I've seen that in Turkey. I got into trouble once, and that was indeed in Turkey. For internal reasons in our company, we had to, and to save gobble money, we reorganized our whole corporate structure. I had done an acquisition, we done the acquisition acquisition we've done in Turkey, we've done as a joint venture. We've done a joint venture with an outside company. And so we had, it had been a listed company in Turkey, listed on the Istanbul Stock Exchange. So we had the listed company, which was owned by a Turkish joint venture company. The two parents of the Turkish joint venture, were both Turkish companies. Well, at least our side was another Turkish company, which was owned by a French company. Okay. So you can understand the structure. So we're talking about the French company, the first French company, it's the one mother, grandmother, great-grandmother. We want to move the French company into a different subsidiary in order to save like 6 million euros a year in dividend in taxes and dividends, which is another issue. It's another issue. But so we wanted to do this. All of a sudden, I have Turkish counsel who tells me we have to run. We have the listed company. There's 5% that's floating in the listed company. We have to run a tender offer on the 5%. Because under Turkish stock market rules, any change in the ownership of one of the company, you have to run on what's left listed on the stock exchange. No one would do that. It's just cash. Going from 95% to 100% just costs you money. Makes no sense. So, learn your law. Learn your concepts of law. Think about, as I said to Professor Fox earlier today, somebody told me something before I went to law school. And it has served me very, very well from the beginning. And it's helped me more or less fly by the seat of my pants through Colombia, Turkey, different countries. And that is where the economic decisions, where two economies come up with the same answer, the law will be the same in the two countries. Now, the concept is actually Marxist. I know it's not people don't like to. Marx said that the law was the scaffolding of a crumbling economic system, or something to that effect. But to a large extent, it's true. So you find your way, take advantage of your legal education, take advantage of the questioning that you have, ask the questions, understand where things work, understand where to ask the issue, where to ask for more help. That's the key. That's the key to, I think that's probably the key to any career, but it's certainly the key to an international career, as I've seen in my humble. Yes.
Did you have to pass the law in France?
It was an issue I thought about a lot. I decided, I know people who haven't. I know people who were in the same situation as I was 2 years ago who made the choice not to for a question of, perfectly honest, for questions of retirement issues, because I won't go into that. I chose to do it because, first of all, it's legitimate, it gives you more legitimacy. I did not have to when I was in-house. 2 words, the French bar, you can't be an employee, except if you're a lawyer working for a law firm. That's the only situation where you can be in an employment situation. The French legal profession prides itself on independence, and so it's considered to be incompatible to be an employee, and as an employee, then you're subject to hierarchy and the like, and to be a lawyer. So I chose to join the bar, and I chose the Paris bar as opposed to the bar in the town I live. They're for legitimacy and probably double my billing potential. Whereas, I know people who are doing perfectly fine doing interim work as an interim general counsel, different
So that meant you had to quit your in-house position, right?
That wasn't an issue because my in-house position disappeared. I was restructured out of my job, so I was in a position where I was free. I was looking for another in-house position, and I think if an in-house position came, if the right in-house position came along, I've had my choice of others, I may take it and resign the bar. But I made the choice to join the bar, and I thought it was the right choice. And it actually, despite everything I say about when I slammed the door of the law firm I left in Detroit, it felt right at the time that I filed to join the Paris bar. It felt right.
Well, last question is, you're not a French national, so how did you?
I am.
You are, okay.
But recent.
Recent. I was gonna say, how did you overcome immigration when you first went there?
I worked for a French company and they dealt with the immigration. And to be perfectly honest, especially since I was in a small town, I'm one of the guy, my predecessor in my job, the first day I was there, he said, put on a suit, come with me. We went to meet the head of the immigration office in the local prefecture, and then once a year she would call me up and she'd say, could you come by my office and sign a few documents? Because they were happy to have somebody who was in a big company. And I'll leave it there, I won't say anything else, because anything else would be, but it's, and then for years and years, when we moved to Paris, it was a little bit more complicated, but I didn't have the time to, so it was the immigration aspect. I quickly got onto it. There's a 10-year card, wasn't an issue, and I only filed for nationality because I was tired of not voting, and I had the time, because I had been restructured out of this job. I had a little bit more time to spend the time to put the paperwork together, which was significant. And now actually, one of the things I do, we have a number of clients who were French or want to become French or whatever, and I actually do a little bit of immigration work for the rare individual clients we have, or they're corporate clients who have an individual issue. I do a little bit of French immigration, which is, it's only interesting because I've been through it. And I discovered, just say I'll do a little bit of thing for the Lansing government. There's something in Lansing called the Office of the Great Seal that I really recommend. There's a concept in legalization documents called an apostille, which is it's an approval from the government organizations, and this document is real. And this is given by the Office of the Great Seal in Lansing. For $1.
Great name.
It is a great name.
I think it's a customer.
Yes.
Yeah, so for the most part, your business is centered around, it encompasses Europe, correct? Do you work outside of France?
When I was in-house, I worked all over the world.
Okay, that leads into,
Today, for a number of reasons, it's a little bit more restrained, but not completely. Our client base divides more or less into two. We have a few individual clients, and I'll separate them. Our business base, which is 95% of our client base, divides about 60-40 inbound, outbound. And inbound are largely American companies with French and some European operations, but certainly French operations. And we operate largely as their general counsel, European general counsel, or French general counsel. Our outbound operations are for small to mid-sized French companies, largely industrial but not exclusively, largely family-oriented but not exclusively. And we will operate for them all over the world. I did a deal last time I was here at the end of June, and I was in the process of finishing an acquisition. It was an acquisition of a French company in bankruptcy, which had a U.S. subsidiary and a Singaporean subsidiary. So we operated the whole range for the client, because it was a French client. we don't hold ourselves out as, I hold myself out as a French lawyer, but I don't do French. The work I do, there are 10 of us in the office, and I'm the only non-French person. I let the French people do the French law, and I do the rest. I do transactional work, contracts, you know. But I will handle French issues, because I've been around them for 30 years.
The reason I asked is I was wondering if the legal climate has changed at all in the wake of the Brexit, or
Too early to tell.
nothing's happened? You know?
Nothing, they haven't, the last word that I heard that came out of the Conservative Party Congress and the cabinet meetings that followed up on that was that they were going to invoke Article 50 in the first quarter of 2017, which would open up 2 years of negotiations after that. And it's clear that there are at least two major continental European powers that are for a very, very hard Brexit. And I think that Theresa May has been pushing for a hard Brexit, but she's getting hung out. To what extent she's doing it for playing to the crowd and to force the hands of the wimps in her cabinet, or the midgets, mental midgets in her cabinet, and to what extent she's doing it because that's what she really wants to, that she feels that's what really should be done. I can't talk too early.
But you haven't faced any employee mobility issues, or?
There will be employee mobility issues, but that the major issue. I mean, the point is, why did the British vote to leave? The British voted to leave largely. I mean, it's hard to say, but one of the major issues of the campaign was the European community, the European Union is built on three principles: freedom of movement of people, goods, and capital. The British they don't want the freedom of capital. They've won the freedom of capital. The freedom of goods is what has produced an economy in Britain. It's one of the things that's produced an economy of Britain that operates, and that is because that it's a more open economy, and so any number of, be it the Japanese, the Americans, anybody, has used Britain as the manufacturing base to attack the continent on the basis of free movement of goods. What the British didn't want was free movement of people, because there are towns in northern England where the first language is Polish. And this is free movement of people within the community, within the European Union. So what they don't want today is free movement of people. And so be it the French or the Germans, are saying, you don't want free movement of people, up yours. You don't get free movement of goods, and you don't get free movement of capital. And the major issues, that's one major issue. Another major issue is going to be, there's something that's called the financial passport. Financial passport means that you have a financial document, an offer, a stock listing, a mutual fund. It passes muster in the UK. It can be sold anywhere within the European Union. That's all. Wow. Frankfurt, Milan, Paris, they're itching to get that work. You think they're going to let the passport stand if the British want out? No way. This is hundreds of jobs, hundreds of thousands of jobs on the continent. But it's way too early to talk. Again, wait until the end of the first quarter of 2017 when they invoke Article 50.
Can I invoke my prerogative?
Yes.
So I'm not trying to hurry you up. Just a question that I think might be of interest to people. In thinking about classes that students might take, obviously, a lot is dictated by what's studied by the bar, et cetera. But are there particular areas of study that you think are kind of, coming over the horizon that it would be useful for people to
tendency is to say, anything you have to learn, you can learn yourself. So my tendency is to get the bar out of the way, become a good lawyer, and the rest you can learn. And if you can't learn, then there's a problem, but that's a different issue. You should be learning every day anyway, but that's, again, another issue. I'm not sure that there's any, what I've found has been interesting is to be interested in the business. You can't learn business in a law class. You can learn the law, and the idea and the role is a role, if you're in-house, or even if you're outside counsel, it's just slightly different views of the same issue, is to listen to a problem that tends to be a business problem, and to read it through this special filter that our law professors teach us, or that open us up to. They don't teach us. They open, and after what I said about the Socratic method, it's not taught, it's just open. And I think that that's the key. And so any class you can take, I'm not sure that's going to help. But I took every international class I could when I was here, in part because that's what interested me, in part because I felt that, and let's look at it. I'll just debunk everything I just said. You want to have a vision. You want to present yourself for a potential employer. Excuse me. It's much better to have every international class on your transcript than to have none. You create it, you buy credibility. And so you have to find the right balance. I took an international business transactions class here. It was fun. Mike McIntyre's tax class probably taught me more than most things. Contracts, secure transactions, though I forget it all. Now I have to recreate the whole secure transactions, because in 6 months I've had 3 or 4 bankruptcy issues, serious bankruptcy issues. I don't practice that. So, to answer your question, yes and no. I think it is important to buy the credit, to create the credibility, but the credibility you'll have to get through your jobs.
I want to know, when you took the bar for France, was it in English?
No, it was in French. But there were, it's not the same exam. There are a couple of equivalencies that I had the chance of doing. One was being a member of a foreign bar for a certain number of years, and that would have led to an exam which was 30 minutes on French law and 30 minutes on ethics. And I count in on the basis of having been in-house for a number of years, which was just an ethics exam.
Do you notice any trends, like an investment in certain areas of the world in your business, like maybe where you think more international business opportunities are going to be growing in the coming years?
Everybody's still investing in trying to find the next, what will replace Thailand and Indonesia. So there's a fair amount of investment. There's a fair amount of investment in Vietnam, but the investment situation, foreign direct investment situation isn't great. I read a report recently about foreign direct investment. Any number of organizations tends to be like the Commerce Department and its equivalent in any given country will have things about foreign direct and both inbound and outbound investment. Keep in mind that as especially as Chinese wages go up and demands of Chinese labor increase. The Foxconns and the different non-service providers of the world will continue to hunt for the next low-price manufacturing arena. So today that's Vietnam, tomorrow it's Cambodia, the day after it's going to be Bhutan. And then eventually it'll go to Africa, but not yet. That being said, that there is a lot of investment in Africa still but it's still in raw materials and and increasingly in oil and gas between Mozambique, Angola, and now Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda.
And then, sorry, really quick, you mentioned Colombia, doing some work in Colombia. Do you guys do a lot of work in South America as well, or?
I did. It's definitely, it's a minefield. You have a wide range of investment clients, wide range of investment opportunities. From the U.S. very much, I'm viewing it from a European perspective. Europe has done relatively well in Chile.